You've turned on Sexy Marriage Radio, where the best sex happens in the marriage bed. Here's your host, Dr. Corey Allen.
Welcome back to another episode of Sexy Marriage Radio, where straightforward, honest conversations take place on pretty much any topic that needs to be addressed to help married sex be better. And each week we have a variety of different voices that come on Thursday, and I'm really looking forward to where today's conversation goes because our guest today has a lot of great things to say. But before we do that, I want to hear from you because I know the Sexy Marriage Nation has a lot of great things to say. And the way you can let us know what you think is you can give us a phone call on our voicemail line at 214-702-9565 with any kind of questions or feedback or topics you want addressed. You can also email us, feedback@sexymarriageradio.com. And if you like the show, I'm going to ask you to jump on iTunes and rate and review us because that helps us climb the charts in the sexuality category and spread the word that married sex is the hotbed for sex. And so with all of the intro stuff out of the way, let me tell you just a brief intro about Dr. Tina Sellers, that she has a book out, Sex, God, and the Conservative Church, Erasing Shame from Sexual Intimacy. She's a marriage and family therapist, sex therapist, and is also the director of medical family therapy at the Seattle Pacific University. And so, Dr. Sellers, I have to say, I am honored to have you join us in the Sexy Marriage Nation today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
So did I miss anything about...
I also run an institute. I can talk about that a little bit later.
Perfect. So, yep. But the thing that intrigues me most about your work is probably because it aligns with my experience of growing up in a church, and that being a conservative church, and it's one of those arenas where a lot of what was taught when it comes to sex and sexuality was silence.
Right.
Or the unspoken, and sometimes even spoken, don't do it. You know, stay away from it. It's bad. You know, it's horrible. Save it for somebody you love.
Exactly.
Kind of a thing.
Exactly.
And that seems to align exactly with what brought about your book and the work that you've got going. Is that accurate? Is that how you kind of stumbled upon where you've landed?
Yeah, it is. One of the courses that I teach at Seattle Pacific University, I teach graduate marriage and family therapy students. And I teach them one of the courses they have to take is the human sexuality course. It's required for licensure. Mm-hmm. And I have them write their sexual autobiography. And most people, when they hear that, they're like, wow, what? You have them do what?
Right.
But, really, if you're going to go see a therapist, you want your therapist to be clear about the stories in their life.
Yep, absolutely.
And growing up in our country where we have no comprehensive sex education, your sexual story can exist almost not in a narrative form.
Okay.
Most people grow up in silent and shaming homes.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you don't learn about sexuality, it's like you have, I remember that time I was kissed, or, I remember getting in trouble. But it's really not a cohesive story inside of us.
Right.
But we have all these biases that live in us. So if you're sitting with a client and you're not aware of your story and you're not aware of your biases, and then somebody tells you something, then you're going to react, right? You're going to respond, right? And so in our program, we actually have our students write aspects of their story in many, many different classes. Mm-hmm. So that's not an unusual thing.
Yeah.
So they have, 60 or 70 questions. So they look at family of origin, all the way back around gender and sexuality. I walk them all the way through their childhood, their adolescence, and their adulthood, looking at many, many different things. So at the end of it all, it is a cohesive narrative.
Right.
And they can look at their legacy. So I've read well over 500 of these in my career. And around the year 2000, I started to notice a radical shift in what I came to call sexual shame.
Okay.
So how that showed up is there was a dramatic increase in humiliation and disgust around how they felt about their body and their own identity as a sexual being.
Okay.
As they thought about what they had done or even not done, felt or not felt about their sexuality, or thought of as they were growing up. And yet, what they were describing to me was no different than any other cohort of students that I had ever had before.
Okay.
And this happened that year, the next year, the next year. And I realized I had hit something and I just really wasn't sure what it was that I hit. So it took me a little bit to figure it out. And honestly, the how they felt was so dramatically different and so awful that I was in tears over it. And so I began to ask questions, and I found that what I was hitting was the first wave of students that had begun, they had been affected by the abstinence only education program that was hitting the United States. Really, it peaked in the early 90s. And then some of these kids were also getting the purity messages in their youth group. And, that's when the pieces of pizza were being passed around and the apples and the spitting in the cup. I mean, I didn't know about any of this stuff. I grew up in the Jesus movement. It was really different then. It was totally different. This sort of love and peace and, totally different. So,
I got you.
Yeah. And so I was shocked. And then the other thing is, these people were also, those who were partnered, were describing levels of sexual dysfunction in their partnerships, in their marriages, that I had never seen in people in their 20s before.
Okay.
So pelvic pain disorders, vaginismus, erectile dysfunction. I'd never seen it in kids.
Not happening that early as far as an age and newness of a relationship?
Right. I'd never seen it. And so it was just shocking to me. So I was seeing this, and then my own personal background, my childhood, I was raised by Swedish immigrants. And so Swedes can tend to be very, very body positive. They give a lot of sex education because that's really typical. It's been typical in Sweden since the 40s.
Okay.
So I grew up in this very positive family around bodies and sexuality. People talked about sex all the time. They talked about go brush your teeth.
Right.
It was like, and so it was this huge contrast, and it really was heartbreaking. I had become a Christian in my adolescence, but like I said, it was in the 70s where it was just a very different time frame, Like, you were really popular if you came to know Jesus and also got off LSD, which was not my testimony.
I gotcha.
So it was just a very different, thing. And I had to do a lot of investigating. And then I thought, boy, I don't think the church has any notion that the symptoms that my students are dealing with is exactly like somebody who's experienced childhood sexual abuse. And so the church is involved actually in sexually abusing kids. It has no idea that that's what it's doing. In essence. That's not its intent, obviously. But that, in fact, is what's happening. And I need to start researching this, writing about it, talking about it, because this was never God's intent. And we need to do this right.
Yes, exactly. Because that's the whole arena of it. Don't we do this sometimes as parents, even that if I'm not willing to address something, that miss and lack of information can actually cause damage that I'm not even recognizing. And so the church has seemed to take that stance of, no, this is not an area we want to even explore, because I think what you run into that whole, if we talk about it, people are going to go do it. Well, okay. If you're talking about sex and sexuality, people are doing it anyway. In some manner, shape, or form.
Right. And fear so often takes us in the wrong direction.
Yep.
It's like, oh, I don't want you to drive a car, so I'm going to hide the keys, right? Well, they're going to find the keys, they're going to get in the car, they're going to drive.
Yep.
It's much, much better to say, I want to teach you all about a car.
Yep.
I want to teach you how. And so that you can appreciate, yes, there's a reason we have you wait.
Yes.
They're a ton of fun.
Yeah.
I want you to learn all about it. And you're going to understand why we have you wait a little while.
Yeah.
Because getting on the freeway, you're going to want to wait.
Yeah.
You're going to want to wait. And then you're going to want to do it. And I'm going to want you to do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be great. But you are going to want to wait. And you appreciate it with knowledge.
Yes, exactly. Because that's the same kind of thing. It's the same kind of thing we do with sexuality. That tell me if I'm wrong. That what I've seen in my practice, and then just from the Sexy Marriage Nation and the feedback that we get, there's a disconnect. But as far as society or the culture is going with sex, as far as just a physical thing versus the other components of it, with the emotional and the spiritual and the mental. And the world is almost proposing it's a commodity just as the act, but it's not touching the other sides of it, which in marriage, you can't avoid those things. In any committed relationship, you can't avoid the confluence of all of that.
Yes.
And it seems like at some point that became such a vast shift that I see kids like my kids, I have a 13 and an 11-year-old, and we try to talk about it at the dinner table, and it's very open. And I mean, they're being raised by a therapist, so you know how that goes.
I do.
so exactly. So, but it's one of those that it's that idea of I want to equip you because you're going to want to do this,
of course.
like driving on the highway. It's going to be a part of what life is, but we've got to make sure there's enough knowledge because it's not just one thing. It's a multiple of things.
Exactly. And part of what makes sexuality wonderful is all the other stuff.
Correct.
All combined together.
Correct.
And research shows that when you give kids all the information along the way, open conversations at every step along the way, they actually get involved with sex later, make safer sexual choices. And when they're adults, they have more varied, satisfying sexual relationships. They do understand, like, oh yeah, it's a lot of different stuff. I actually want to be pickier about who I get involved with. And guess what? Kids don't grow up really fast. So I end up wanting to wait because the really cool people are older. They're kind of jerks when they're in high school.
Yep.
Yep. And it naturally happens that way.
Okay.
It just naturally happens.
Yes, it does.
That way.
And so what do we do then because I think there's two ways we could take this conversation. One is, how do we impart to the next generation? How do we shift? Because you're noticing all of a sudden there was some sort of a dynamic shift that happened. Mm-hmm. And so several people in the Sexy Marriage Nation, that's them, that they grew up in that, it's impacting them directly. And so that's one side of the conversation we need to at least address quickly.
Right.
And then the other side still is, how do we carry it forward to make sure if that wasn't what I'm impacted by, I have people in my life that might have been. How do I change that and be an influence in a better way?
Yeah. Well, you are exactly naming exactly where my head went when I saw all of this. That's exactly where my head went. I first asked the question, did Christianity ever get it right? Did we ever have a sex positive or what I would call a new covenant sexual ethic, and a sexual ethic based on what I understood Jesus' ministry to be?
Yep.
Because it was very body positive, sex positive, all of that. And so I traced it back, and we really never did. We built our sexual ethic based on the mind-body split that was already in place in culture from the philosophers that was in place 300 years before, and very patriarchal. And it got going when Constantine became the emperor, and he basically started the empire church, and the men were vying over who was more spiritual based on who could deny the body. That's what was going on.
Okay.
And so they were like, okay, you guys are the bishops, or you guys are the whatever, and they were all denying the body. That's what they were doing. I'm more spiritual than you. And then when they couldn't do it well enough, the women were around to blame. And that's what we've been doing ever since. The body's bad, the spirit's good. And if I can't do it, it's her fault.
Okay.
And we're still doing that.
Okay.
So then I just went further back. And I said, well, on the Abrahamic line, did we have anything sex positive? And then I found these beautiful stories in Hebrew writing and Hebrew mystic writing. And then I saw, oh, it's there. It's all there. We have this relentless, very erotic God chasing after his people, saying your sexuality is on purpose. You will see that I love you right here. This is one of the places I love you, and you will find me communing with you here. When you're honoring you, you're honoring me, and you're honoring who you're with. And it's just, there are all these amazing stories. And so those are all in the book. And so I put the book there because I kept, like you, probably having people come into my office saying, I need to figure out how to heal the sexual shame that has determined how we do our sexuality in our relationship. Right. It's not working. How do I heal? And so in the book this is how we got to this history. Here is the history we should have gotten. Right. Because it's there. Right. God has it there. It's here. So you're going to be okay. Here is a model for how you heal. Right. So we developed an evidence-based model for how you heal. And then here are touch and non-touch practices you can actually put in your relationship that will help you know how to actually integrate your sexuality and your spirituality, how to actually use touch and your faith to heal you, because we don't always know how to do that if that's not what was there. So I think that kind of takes care of that, because that's what people were asking for.
Absolutely.
And I didn't know if it was there, so I went looking for it.
Okay.
But then the other thing, which is what you're asking for too, and that's what I'm hearing from, is I've got so many parents that are like, I have no idea where to begin because it's so not what happened for me. How do I know what to do with my own kids or with the children that are in my life? Because every time they find their happy places, I freeze. Right. I don't know what to do because I'm just a ball of reactivity inside myself. I just want to go, Right. And so that's actually the book I'm working on right now is, so here's what kids do at 2. This is what they naturally do. Yep. Here's what it's going to do inside of you.
Yep.
Right. And here's what you need to do for you to deal with your shame.
Okay.
This is what you need.
Right.
Sort of calm yourself. And then here's what your 2-year-old needs.
Okay.
This is what you say and do with a 2-year-old so that they can know that this is their body and this is normal and this is a happy thing. Right. And then here's what 3-year-olds do. And here's what 4-year-olds do. And here's what they bring up you, because most of us don't know even if you pick up most developmental books with kids, it'll tell you all kinds of developmental things, but it won't tell you how they sexually develop.
Correct. Yeah. It's the other things that the doc will take care of and monitor and all that kind of stuff. They don't do behind the curtain.
No, it's so true. I speak at medical conferences and I'm often asked to speak on sexual development. And the docs, I'm like, you can do this at the well child visit.
Yes.
Honestly, it takes 30 seconds. And they're like, really? And I'm like, yes, please.
And that freaks me out. I can't bring that up.
I know.
Okay, so
the doctors are just as scared because they didn't get the training either.
And that's what, so what's interesting to me, Tina, is that you're talking about a philosophy or a worldview of relationships that's very similar to the Sexy Marriage Radio message, in that there's something deeper going on here, and that our relationships are designed to just really help us grow up. That's the whole point.
Yes.
That there's something, magical even, that I think God put in place
I
to
agree.
help us be better. And why not put us with somebody that we're going to love and drive us crazy and reveal all of our shame just by them being around us? And then if they don't do a good enough job, we're going to have children that will do it for them.
Exactly.
and that, so you get this whole, just melting pot of just anxiety provoking things that just make us have to deal with ourselves.
I totally agree. I call that the spiritual. That's the spiritual nature of our attached relationships, which are marriage and children.
Okay.
And I think if people knew that before they walked down the aisle, they wouldn't be so surprised.
Yes.
Because it's only a matter of time where the spiritual discipline of marriage and parenting pop up.
Yep, exactly. That's what allows me when a couple comes down and sits in front of me and tells me their whole story, and I look at them with this blank face going, okay, what else is wrong? Because what you're describing is supposed to happen.
Yeah, your marriage is working.
Yeah, well done. Welcome to married life.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let me kind of, because I would not be doing the Sexy Marriage Nation service if we didn't spend at least a little bit of time as we wrap this up on if this directly impacts you, a listener, right? That they are ones that, okay, wait, this is me. This is the world I've been in. I see my sex life and my sexuality just covered with shame.
Yeah.
What do they need? What's some best things they can do? I mean, obviously the book will go into even more detail.
Right.
But what are some other things that we can touch on that do help them see, hey, okay, I can deal with that. I could try this. And if you'd speak there for a second.
You bet. Yeah. So I'm just going to briefly talk about the model that's in the book, and I call it taking care of the mess, and mess stands for model for erasing sexual shame. So taking care of the mess. Okay. Good. And there are 4 things, and it's frame, name, claim, and aim. Okay. Okay. So frame is you're going to build a frame or a scaffolding of sex education. Okay. So the thing that actually is the foundation of our shame is we don't know anything. We were never given the education. And so much of our shame is built on mythology, stuff we picked up from movies and from TV and media and pornography even, and so much of that is not true. And then we got weird things at church and from our pastor, they meant well, but it's not helpful. Yep. So actually, if you go to www.nwioi.com, that's the Northwest Institute on Intimacy, there's a resource page. There is things just on sex education. You can just get some books and just start reading and go, oh my gosh, this is the truth of your body. Your body is fearfully and wonderfully made. God made it that way on purpose. Learn all about it. Okay, that's frame. Name is tell your story about how you grew up in your home. Find one at least safe other that will hear your story. Right? We all want to be seen, known, loved, and accepted. Yep. God made us that way. Yep. Someone needs to hear you and go, so I'm so sorry, sweetheart. You were never meant to go through that. So many of us just went through growing up in a way that was so shaming, and we weren't ever meant to go through that. And shame is a hard time living inside compassion and grace and empathy. Right. It thrives in silence. It thrives. So that's frame, name, claim is begin to claim your body as a good thing. In our culture, our economy is driven on us hating our bodies. Yes. Seeing it as wrong, bad, otherwise. Because if we do, we'll keep going into surgery, we'll keep spending money, we'll keep whatever. Yep. So we get 3,000 advertisements a day coming at us trying to make us feel bad. I come from Swedish stock. I'm at least 40 pounds overweight according to American standards. This body ain't ever going to be different. I mean, honestly, we are made the way that we are. God loves diversity.
Yep.
None of us should go to our deathbeds and realize we spent X number of years hating this body that we were in simply because of the American culture we live in.
Right.
So we need to start learning to claim it and celebrate it and be like, dang, I got up this morning. This is a good thing.
Yep. Right? This is the best thing that can happen right now.
Yeah. So frame, name, and claim. When we start working those three things, we begin to aim, which is write a new legacy for ourselves. So this legacy we've been given never gets passed down again.
Okay.
And we pass down something else that we love and that we like. Those are the things that I always say, start working on those babies and you'll start to feel entirely different.
Right. Because
and you can change this I watch people change it in one generation.
Absolutely, because this goes back to what we just talked about on the nature of relationships, that when I start taking myself differently and handling the way I feel about myself or view myself, it will impact those I'm in relationship with and do life with dramatically without me doing anything other than that.
Yes, exactly.
That's great. So Tina, how else? I mean, you mentioned the website, and I'll put this stuff in the show notes.
Okay,
but tell the Sexy Marriage Nation how else they can find you.
Okay, so you can find me on tinashermersellers.com, and I'll spell that out. So it's www.tinashermersellers.com. That's my website.
Okay.
Then you can find me at www.nwioi.com. That's my institute. And that's where we train therapists and physicians to get training in sexual health and sexual dysfunction. So I say, send your therapist to us. And your doctors, we will help them get the training that they need. We have tons of resources there. We also have a really fun community-built website called thankgodforsex.org, where you can go and hear people tell their stories about growing up in a conservative place and then starting to heal and being like, I thank God for sex finally.
Exactly.
And we've got just fun stuff on there that is there for people. So there's 3 places that you can go.
That's perfect.
I would say also get my book, and if you like it, write a review on it, because like with podcasts, it helps the book get out there.
Yes. And this is one of those books, let me just say this straight out to the Sexy Marriage Nation. This is one of those books that needs to be in huge quantities to people, because the one thing we keep, and I mean, you're a confirmation of this, the one thing that is definitely hitting and impacting married sex is shame.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things that come into making it what it is that make it such a hurdle. And just the practical things that you've written, the practical things you've brought here today, those are things that we start to confront shame better by just getting it out in the open, being heard, being seen, being valued, and then actually being loved.
Yeah. And I'll say one thing about the book. The book took 11 years to write. It is written to therapists and to clients.
Right.
And it's actually like 3 books in one, even though it's little.
Right.
So it says how we got here.
Yep.
It says how you heal. And then it says what you can actually do in your marriage to make it better. So it does have an academic price tag, but it's really, which I didn't get to choose.
Right.
But it's really a worthwhile book.
Yes, it is.
And you can take it to your therapist.
Yes,
even.
it is. All right. Well, Tina, I have to say thank you very much for coming along for the ride today.
Thanks for having me.
And taking us through your world and your lens. This is going to be a benefit to everybody that hears it. I just know that already.
Great. Thanks.
Well, this has been Sexy Marriage Radio. If we left something undone or you want more, let us know. Feedback at sexymarriageradio.com. So wherever you are, whatever you're doing, thanks for taking a little bit of time out of your day to spend it with us. We'll see you next time.